If everything goes according to plan, by the end of this video, we're going to have the step-side bed back on the Silverado, and we'll finally be able to check out the new lowered ride height. About a week and a half ago, we installed the drop hangers, we installed the Viking Performance / Atomic Fab shock relocation setup, and a Hellwig rear sway bar, which would definitely tighten up the handling. But I'm really excited to see how this truck is going to look, because I think the stance is going to be just about perfect, although we do have to adjust the front down just a little bit with the torsion bar adjusters. But anyway, the reason why I haven't put the bed back on yet is because today we need to take care of something inside the fuel tank. So of course that means a larger fuel pump, because we are installing a power adder. And I kind of figured this would be the perfect opportunity to let the cat out of the bag. Guys, we're installing an LSA supercharger on this 4.8 Silverado. So I'm really pumped about that, and hopefully it gets here soon, because I placed the order, I think, back at the beginning of January, and they did tell me 4 to 6 weeks. So hopefully in the next week or two, we do have our supercharger here and we can begin the installation. But in the meantime, we still have plenty of stuff to do. So the fuel system that we're doing today is basically going to duplicate everything I did on the ugly truck, my turbo big block Silverado, and it worked perfectly in that one, so I figured, why not just do the same exact thing? These parts are fairly affordable, it's easy to do it yourself, but the one question I got was, is it going to be okay to drive this thing with the big fuel pump on a stock regulator? So believe it or not, the 8.1 uses actually the same exact regulator and lines and basically everything as this 4.8 does. And on that truck, I have had 0 issues running with that 450 pump. In fact, I can turn the engine off but have the key on, so the fuel pump is running, and it has no problem regulating fuel pressure at 58 psi, which is exactly where it's supposed to be. So that tells me that the fuel regulator is doing exactly what it should, and I have no problems. Although I will double check it. I'll put a pressure gauge on this one just to kind of be sure, but it works great on that truck, so we're just going to do the same exact thing. Of course, with the blower, we will have a different regulator because of the fuel lines. They do hook up just a little bit differently. But anyway, that's a subject for another day. Today, I'll show you the parts that we're going to be using. Everything I picked up here is from Racetronix. They're a Canadian company, so support your brothers up there above the border. I know they're going through some stuff right now. But anyway, here is everything that we've got. Starts with a Walbro 450 pump. This is just kind of your standard fuel pump, I guess. It'll support probably 600 or 700 horsepower in that range. It's compatible with ethanol, but of course, if you do use it with ethanol, your horsepower threshold goes down a little bit. And because that guy does use a fair amount more current than the stock wiring can support, I grabbed a Racetronix Hotwire Kit. That's the part number right there. And more or less, this connects directly to the alternator. It's got nice heavy gauge wiring. Has its own built-in high current relay. It's weatherproof and all that, and it'll plug and play directly into your factory connections, and it sends a whole bunch more current into the tank than the stock wiring can. To go along with that, I grabbed a little jumper harness that connects from the bulkhead down to the pump. I grabbed a replacement bulkhead just in case, and then I grabbed a couple of fuel socks just because I wasn't sure which one would work best. And then I hate using submersible fuel line. I love using this plastic convoluted tube. I believe this is 11 millimeter, and I grabbed 4 different lengths just because I didn't remember what length worked best, and these are like, I think they're like $2 or $3 a piece. So I grabbed extras just in case. And I have my old bucket and hanger assembly. This is what came in the truck. That fuel pump is shot, but I wanted to hang on to it just because I knew I'd be doing this at some point in time. So let's get to work. So it is worth noting that we are going to lose just a little bit of the factory functionality by modifying the fuel bucket the way that we had. But unfortunately, there's just no way around it because these new Walbro pumps are so much bigger than the original. You could probably put like a 255 in there and keep the factory active fill design, but with a 450, there's just no way because the pump is so much larger. Basically, this fuel bucket is kind of a reservoir and it's intended to always be full, even if the tank is like nearly empty. And the actual pickup for the pump is kind of down inside here. And there's a separate suction tube out here that kind of fills this bucket up. The return line from the engine kind of keeps this full. So like I said, no matter how much fuel is in the tank, this pump will always be submerged. And even under acceleration and hard braking, that fuel pump is always going to have fuel right around the pickup. But to get the Walbro in there, as you can see, I had to cut away quite a bit of the basket there, or the bucket, whatever you want to call it. I've got the filter sock thing just kind of hanging out to the side, and I've got it so it's sitting just barely above the bottom surface of the tank. So when this is put together, the springs that push this kind of down to the bottom aren't going to be compressing that little filter sock. But as you can see, it's just sitting on the bottom of the tank. Now, in theory, that could cause problems under hard acceleration and when the tank is kind of on the low side, because you see the pump is mounted right in the middle of the tank and all that fuel will slosh to the back. That is a concern, and if you have a big enough fuel demand, you're running wide open throttle and you drop fuel pressure, well, that could cause the engine to run lean, which in turn could cause damage just because of the way that you've installed the fuel pump. Now, that being said, that is kind of theoretical. In the real world, the way that I modified this, it's the same exact way as I have it on my other truck. And so far, I have never experienced any low fuel pressure issues. I have a fuel pressure gauge on there so I can constantly monitor it. Even if I have a quarter of a tank of fuel and I do a hard pull, I have never dropped fuel pressure at all. Now, it's not to say it couldn't happen. I mean, if I ran the truck just a little bit lower on fuel, that is a risk, but it's just something to kind of keep in mind. But for me personally, quarter tank and above, I have never had any problems. So that's kind of how we're going to run this one. From here on out, we will get the little bit of wiring done on the inside. I've got a plug. Oh, there's the new one. This is the new bulkhead connector. Will get kind of clipped into the top of the bulkhead there, I guess. I'm going to get the wiring switched over for the fuel gauge from that old connector to the new heavy gauge wiring connector. So that plugs right into the top, kind of like that. And then that plugs directly into the fuel pump. So there's no splicing needed inside the tank. Then we'll get this thing put back together. I am using these Odelfi clamps, I think they call it. I prefer these anytime I'm putting something inside a tank where I'll never see it again. That's always given me a good leak-free installation. So we'll get those on there, and then we'll work on the Hotwire kit. And then finally, we'll get the bed back on the truck and see how it looks. Once we got the fuel pump actually mounted into the basket and the fuel line connected, from that point forward, it's pretty much just a factory installation. We just swapped out the replacement fuel pump that was in the tank with the original one, except with the 450 pump in there. And then the fuel lines connect right back up, no problem there. And then the wiring was kind of the same thing, like all plug and play, zero modification or splicing required. Although, because this harness is designed to fit Silverados or full-size GM trucks and SUVs, so Suburbans and Tahoes included, there is a lot of wire, so you can get all the way back to a rear tank if you need to. But on a single cab short bed, we don't hardly need any wire. So I took about 6 feet out of the one wire that comes from the alternator, just so we didn't have to make a big loop or nothing like that. It is butt connected together and heat shrunk, so it's all sealed up nice and tidy. And from there, we've got just the one main connector that goes into the tank. That's what provides the high current. And then we have this other connector that originally went there. And that is what provides the signal from the relay, as well as the information for the fuel level sending unit. The new relay is mounted right there. There's a factory ground bolt that the ground is attached to. And then the wires run along that frame rail with the original harness. Attaches to the alternator. And then, of course, we have the fuse that's mounted in line, and I stuck it right there on the edge of the regular fuse block. So I figure if I ever have a problem I'm trying to chase down, all the fuses are in one location. I did a quick test on it, and I turned the key without starting the engine, and we had like 56, 57 PSI of fuel, which as far as I'm concerned is perfect. That means the pump is not overrunning the regulator. If I turn the key and say we had like 75 or 80 PSI, well, that would tell me that the fuel pressure regulator on there is not adequate, but we got like perfect pressure without the truck even running. So I'm perfectly happy with how this has turned out. I did want to share with you guys a cool little gadget that was sent over to me. It's like a headlamp LED thing. Check these guys out. They're called Odelfi or Odelfi. They make a couple different versions. They sent me 2 of these. They got like a little battery pack on the side. It is rechargeable. And then like this sucker is way bright. Check that out. Like you turn it on, it's kind of like you don't want to look right at it because it's that bright. And there is a low beam function as well. And then on the side, there's like that little flashlight deal. Same thing, high beam, low beam, and then off. So check those guys out. It's a pretty cool tool. It's comfortable to wear. I had it on for like 45 minutes or so, and it stayed bright the whole time. I think they said this one will last like, what do we got here? 2.5 hours to charge. And then, what did it say? I thought it said somewhere there's like a 2.5 hour battery time as well, or maybe longer depending on the model. So anyway, check those guys out. Odelfi, they make LED headlamps, comfortable to wear, and they're plenty bright. So now I need to get the bed back on the truck, which is really exciting because we lowered the thing and I want to see how it's going to look. And then I also got a new hood, and if I have time after that, I'm going to buff it out because it is a junkyard hood. It's much nicer than my other one, but it's a little bit scratched up. So first, let's get the bed back on this thing and go from there. So I realized my camera died just as I was lowering the bed back down on the truck, but we're back in the shop, everything's bolted down, and you kind of can get the gist of what we're doing, basically just using the cherry picker to lower the bed down. Although I was being extra careful not to hit or crunch anything because it's been like 15 to 20 degrees outside for the past week. And these ABS plastic bedsides, they are pretty brittle. Like my dad had a 2001 dually, I remember, and when he was plowing snow with it, the fenders were made from the same plastic, and a lot of times he would like hit just a pile of snow and it would just kind of shatter the entire bedside. So anyway, just kind of make sure you're really careful with these things in the cold weather, but we didn't have any incidents at all. The bed is back on the truck, and I'm really loving the ride height as well. I did lower the front just by 1/2 of a turn on the torsion bar, just because it was basically even, where now we're about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch lower out front. than we are out back. So liking how it's going to look. I think the only changes I'm going to make to the front suspension are I am going to put my drop spindles on, but then readjust the torsion bars back up just so my ball joint angles aren't quite so bad. And I didn't want to lower the front any further just because of the CV angles. They already kind of go uphill just a little bit. But of course, these trucks, you can't go much lower with them. But full-time all-wheel drive, we're always going to be sending power through the front CVs, and it would probably work just fine being a little bit lower. But like I said, I kind of want to err on the side of caution just based on some past experiences I've had with some all-wheel drive converted trucks. So anyway, on the hood thing, I actually don't have time to get into that right now because we have a upcoming trip that we're taking kind of on short notice, and you guys will see all about that in the next video if this all stacks up how I think it's going to. But I'll give you the short version of it. This is a new / junkyard hood a viewer had kind of donated, and it doesn't look the greatest, but it looks a lot better than my old hood here. If you guys remember, the paint on this thing is like completely cracked and checkerboarded, and it looks really nasty. And this one is kind of starting to do the same thing just a little bit, but it is not nearly as bad. And the only other thing, this was a junkyard hood, so it does have its fair share of scratches and scuffs on it. So I went out and I bought a whole bunch of buffing supplies. I really know nothing about paint correction, but we're going to give it a shot, although I think I will probably make that its own video maybe next week or something like that. So that's what we're doing with the Stepside. That's where we're at. I'm really excited about the all-wheel drive setup. I think I might make one more change to the exhaust. I might throw my all-wheel drive transfer case in, and then hopefully by that point the power adder will be here, the supercharger. But I'm a little bit hesitant about doing the all-wheel drive conversion just because I wanted to dyno it in the same rear-wheel drive configuration on the same dyno, but I might just kind of get impatient, do the all-wheel drive conversion, and then find an all-wheel drive dyno somewhere around to kind of test it like that. So that's what we have in the works, guys. Thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. Like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help the channel. We're trying to get to 100,000 subs. We're a little bit away, but I know we can make it happen. Hopefully within the next 6 months. So hopefully by June or July, we're at 100K, and then we'll move on to the next milestone. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you for subscribing. I appreciate each and every one of you, and we'll catch you again in another couple of days.